Okay, wonderful. All right, the Human Rights and Equity Commission, August 28th, 2024 hybrid meeting is called to order at 4:32 p.m. Just a quick reminder, throughout the meeting, please announce your name before making comments. This is for accessibility and identifies those who are talking and not using monitors. We will begin with a roll call of the commissioners and encourage each member to provide a self-description. This is Jeff Kitchens, the chair, speaking right now, and I am a Caucasian male in a pink button-down shirt and tan pants. And I'm here. Vice Chair Carolyn Peacock Biggs.
Good evening, Carolyn Peacock Biggs present. I am a Black female wearing a white and black striped short sleeve shirt and glasses.
Council Connector Jasmine Wilder.
No.
Okay. Agatha Ventura.
Agatha Ventura, Latina female with dark hair and glasses and a brown sweatshirt, presenting here today. Hello, everyone.
Hello. Adrian McDougall.
Hello, I am Adrienne McDougall. I am a Hispanic female. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am wearing a blue shirt and have dark hair that's pulled back in a ponytail.
Thank you. Cameron Fisher.
Cameron Fisher, she, her, and I am a white woman with a black t-shirt on, hair pulled back. Good to be here.
Oh, Carly Colgan. Jackie Curry.
Present, Jackie, she, they. I am a mixed Native person, long brown hair and a bright yellow t-shirt.
And I show that Manoj Alapuria has an excused absence, so he will not be here. All right. If we can go around and introduce the city staff that are present.
Start with me.
Please.
Hi, I'm Lisa Larson. I'm the administrative support staff for a couple of a committee and a commission. I go by she, her. I'm a thicker Hispanic woman with long hair, and it is more pepper than salt.
Wonderful.
Good afternoon, Cassandra Kehoe, she, her, Ada. I am sitting in council chambers. I serve as the accessibility and equity manager for the city. I'm a white Latina woman. I have long brown hair, a jersey knit blue blazer, and a shirt that says "Abide No Hatred," that are Southern.
I'm Ian Whiteheiser, he, him, his. I am a white male with relatively short hair, a better haircut than I've had in a while because I finally found my guy, barber guy. And I'm wearing a blue and white striped shirt that has some intentional wrinkling.
The descriptions just get better as you go along. It's
Andres Portela, pronouns he, him, Equity and Inclusion Director for the City of Bend. I am Ian's twin, but wearing a blue sweater over it. But instead of blue, it's gray. I have a curly black afro with brown cocoa skin. And I give it back to you.
Okay. Introduction of visitors.
Hi, I'm Captain Sarah Martinez. I'm a reporter with Oregon Public Broadcasting. My pronouns are she, her, and I have on black pants and a black shirt with a red flannel vest that I turned into a vest myself. Chopped off the arms. Yeah.
Welcome.
Yes. All righty, can I get a volunteer from the Human Rights and Equity Commission to read our land acknowledgement?
We would like to acknowledge that the beautiful land known as Bend, Oregon, north of the Columbia River, is the original homeland of the Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs. The Confederated Tribes ceded this land in the Treaty of 1855 while retaining regular and customary hunting, fishing, and gathering rights. The Warm Springs, Wasco, and Northern Paiute people inhabited this area in certain seasonal times that clearly established their presence. It is also important to note that the Klamath Trail ran north through this region to the Great Cellular Falls trading grounds. This trade route expanded the impact of commerce between tribal nations. We acknowledge and thank the original stewards of this land. It is our hope that guests continue to honor and care for this land.
Excellent, thank you. It's wrong. All righty, we will move now into HREC business. Again, this is Jeff Kitchens, the chair, and approval of the July 31st, 2024 draft minutes. Are there any corrections to the previous meeting minutes for July 31st, 2024? Okay, looks like there are no corrections. Can I get a motion to approve the draft meeting minutes?
I think Vice Chair said motion.
Yes. Carolyn Peacock Biggs, I motion that the minutes be received. Recorded.
Can I get a second?
A second. Say your name. Cameron Fisher, she, her.
All those in favor? Say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, motion passes unanimously. We're gonna review and approve the August agenda now. We have today a standing item with our council liaison update. Councilor Perkins. Following that, we will open up for public comment. Under old business this evening, we have update on camping code. Under new business, we'll be talking about our work plan. We'll have a work plan working session. And also some referencing documents for HREC on onboarding sheet. We'll have next our roundtable discussion and allow and identify any items that are going to go in the bin, tasks or follow-ups. We'll finish off with we'll have some equity department updates following that, led by Andres. And then we'll be adjourning at some point between now and 6:30. Any questions or corrections, updates, etc. to the agenda? All right, wonderful. Let's move into the standing item updates from Councilor Perkins.
Hi, everyone. Megan Perkins, she, her. Sorry, I'm not on camera right now. I'm actually traveling with my family. So if you hear giggling or rustling, that is my 3 kids. Just wanted to update on a couple of things today. One is that, we have our next council meeting next Wednesday, but next Thursday at from 2 to 4 in the afternoon, we have a joint meeting with the county. And we're going to be talking about some pretty meaty things. We're going to be talking about our growth plan, and we're going to be talking about plans for Juniper Ridge as they relate to the homeless, our China Hat pilot, and just trying to come to some consensus so that our work doesn't continue to be siloed. And I would love if someone had the time to attend that meeting. It is next Thursday between 2 and 4. I would love to have an HREC individual commissioner there just to listen in and report back at the next meeting, because I think it's important that we have someone there to really think about some of the equity things that we're talking about. So that is, I guess I'll pause there to see if there's any volunteers that would have the time next Thursday at 2 o'clock to be in downtown at the county building.
This is Jackie. I will have to check with my work supervisor, but I am
Okay. Wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Great. Just two other things. One is that we talked about the electrification resolution at our last council meeting, and we'll be talking about it again coming up at future council meetings. And the idea behind this resolution is that we're sort of pledging that we will attempt. We're saying basically non-fossil fuels in case so it's not just electrification, but any new city property or substantially renovated city property, we are committing to finding a way of providing basically power without fossil fuels. So that conversation continues, and if that's something that you're interested in.
You're breaking up.
Oh, here.
The connection's bad. We
Can you hear me? Oh, can you hear me now?
Now we can't.
Oh, is it better now?
Now I can hear.
Okay,
No.
I'm so sorry. When did I lose you?
The electrification project was the last thing we heard, Councilor.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, so the idea behind that is, any new or substantially renovated city property, we are committing to providing electricity or electrification or non-fossil fuel usage. Sorry, I'm trying not to break up here. So if you're interested in learning more about that, I'm happy to get more information to HREC on that. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about was the camping code and vehicle camping, which I know Ian's about to talk about. So I just really we can talk as after Ian does his presentation, but I would really to step into this work.
We've lost you.
Hope. Okay. Hello?
We are now connected again.
I am so sorry. We are on a drive and it just keeps going in and out. I apologize. I can jump in later, but I just wanted to, as we talk about the camping code, invite HREC to really step into your role as an advisory role and as a policy advisory and advocacy role. So I will just wait until Ian's done his presentation and we can talk more then.
One quick question for the meeting next week. Will there be a virtual option as well, or just in person?
I believe there will be a virtual option.
Okay, so then I can join as well.
Excellent. I will make sure to get that information out to you.
Thank you.
And that was Commissioner Agatha.
Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
Great.
Commissioner Agatha Ventura, thank you.
Great.
Okay,
All
great.
right, and that's it for me.
All righty, wonderful. Thank you, Councilor Perkins. This is Jeff Kitchens, he, him, the chair. And any other questions or responses on the meeting next week for Councilor Perkins?
No hands raised.
On the meeting or on her update?
Her update, and if you're interested in attending the meeting.
And I do. Cameron Fisher. I guess I'd love to know a little bit more on what kind of feedback you're getting from the community on the camping code. And kind of what's been happening lately with folks in the community. And maybe Ian can give that, or maybe Megan when she circles back. I have concerns, and I imagine there are other people who have concerns. So maybe a little bit more info on that would be helpful for me.
Yeah, so Andres
Yeah,
Portela.
I'm happy to talk after Ian goes. Yeah, that's fine, and talk to you a little about the community.
Thank you.
I was gonna say Ian's doing a little bit of a presentation around that. More to come. Cool. Good to move forward.
Yes, all righty. Thank you again, Mayor Pro Tem Megan Perkins. Let's move on to public comment, and I will pass it to city staff to facilitate public comment.
Andres Portela, pronouns he, him, Equity and Inclusion Director. Public comment during the Human Rights and Equity Commission is intended to be welcoming and inclusive towards all speakers at public meetings and to create an atmosphere of mutual care and respect. These meetings often provide an opportunity to provide public input and for community members to share thoughts and opinions with their elected leaders and advisory bodies. However, they are not a time to level personal attacks or threats, disrupt the meeting, use obscene, vulgar, or discriminatory language, or discourage anyone from participating. While community members may disagree with each other or the city on issues and give critical feedback, they are expected to do so respectfully in accordance with these rules. The advisory body will hear 5 public comments for the duration of 2 minutes or a total of 10 minutes. If a speaker goes over the allotted time, they will be asked to pause or mute to advance the meeting. I think we only have one participant online, which is Sarah, and then one person in person. So, Catherine.
Would you like to give a comment?
I'm not here to comment.
Okay. Sarah, can you unmute yourself if you'd like to leave a comment?
Thank you. I'm here to listen at this time. I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you.
That is public comment.
Okay. Righty, we will now move to old business and receive an update on the camping code. It's I'm gonna say your name,
Lighthizer, that was good.
Lighthizer.
That was good.
Thank you. Our city attorney.
Thank you. Ian Lighthizer, City Attorney's Office. I introduced myself earlier. I'm going to, you might actually see how many windows I have open, which would be embarrassing. I'm going to see if I can remember how to share a screen, and I think it's loading. Good. Okay, so apologies right off the bat. This is a PDF and not in PowerPoint, but we had some technical challenges. What I'm going to do, and I can take as much or as little time as HREC wants to spend on this, is I think provide a summary of what we discussed with the council at the last meeting last week on August 21st. And I think the best way of doing that is probably to run through in a really abbreviated fashion the same presentation that council got, so HREC can at least get some of the same information and same visual representations of some of the current rules and potential changes to our code that council is going to be considering and looking forward. I'll run through what those are, but the schedule at this point, again, is last week at the August 21st meeting, we had a work session with council, which is staff presenting information, council sort of taking it in, asking questions, and then providing some general direction to come back with actual amendments to our municipal code that council would consider. That is scheduled at this point to happen at the September 25th council meeting. So about a month from now, second meeting in September is when we will be back to council to present and give them an opportunity to consider the first reading of an ordinance that would amend our municipal code if council adopts it. So at that time, at the September 25th meeting, council members will get another opportunity to ask questions, make amendments to change the suggestions they want to, or just say we like this, we don't like it, we like parts of it, not others. All of that will happen at the September 25th meeting. So that's the next thing on the council agenda. And I think I'll jump in. And again, I'm probably going to burn through this really quick and skip over some slides. If anybody wants to see this presentation, I'm happy to email it to you after. But in the interest of time, I'm not going to give the same presentation that we provided to council. So let's see if this is working. Great. Timeline, and that references the parking code, which is kind of a different project. I'm not going to go into that, but what we started with last week was with council was providing some basic information, including some numbers reflecting status of homelessness in Deschutes County, Central Oregon, Bend in particular. That included some information on the number of shelter beds in Bend, the number of those shelter beds that are low barrier. And this was pretty important, and this was put together. And for any media in the room, I'm happy to send this to you too. You can also find it linked at the agenda for last week's council meeting. But somewhat importantly, we have seen, I'd say, a small but not insignificant decrease in homelessness in Bend, in part due to the city's efforts to support shelter solutions. So again, we provided some updated information to council on some of the options that are out there. These are city supported shelters and safe parking. So these are facilities and resources that the city has supported, especially over the last several years. So most of these things on this slide, the Stepping Stone Shelter, our Navigation Center, the units at Central Oregon Villages, Franklin Shelter, safe parking. These are things that have come online through city financial support and regulatory changes the city has made in the last largely 2, 3, 4 years. So this is the product of a lot of recent work that the city of Bend has done. That's resulted in providing at least 81,000 shelter nights, and including transitioning a lot of individuals from homelessness to permanent housing through various pathways that these city-supported facilities have either created or made available to people. One of the important aspects of this system involves safe parking. This is a regulatory change that the city made a couple of years ago to allow what we call safe parking opportunities. This creates an opportunity for a property owner or somebody in control of a property to come in and submit an application to the city and provide places subject to certain fairly basic conditions for people living in vehicles to safely park. The 16 spaces that we currently have in the city of Bend, not a big number. What the city has done here is create this system whereby people can come in and apply to do this. This is my opportunity to make a plug for churches, other entities, property owners out there in the city. This is an opportunity for you to come to the city through this program and create opportunities for somebody to live safely in a vehicle. So this is, again, it's a regulatory change that the city has made the opportunity, but we need partners to come in and say, I actually want to offer this with my property. So this is my opportunity to plug that program, because we would love that number. It says 62 units, 14 beds. These are spaces. Love those numbers to go up, but we need people to take advantage of this program. Mayor Pro Tem Perkins alluded earlier to this joint meeting with the County Board of Commissioners on September 5th. One of the big themes of that is going to be increasing cooperation between the city and the county to create more managed camp opportunities. So that's a preview of what's coming. We talked a little bit about that with council last week. And then we got into kind of the meat and potatoes of this presentation. And this has to do with, and we'll get there, an overview of what the current rules are in the city through our camping code for managing and regulating how people live in vehicles on public streets and public rights of way. And then some challenges that some of our staff have seen and some recommendations for potential adjustments to the system. So I'm going to go through this pretty quickly. We had some data from the police department. These calls don't necessarily need to go to police. Most of these are not about crimes, but police get a lot of calls. We can see that during a 1-year period, they got approximately 5,000, again, non-emergency calls related to vehicles. And we think about a third of those had to do with people living in a vehicle. Here's the current status. So this is our current system. City of Bend has a camping code. Camping code sets rules on the where, the when, and the how people can live in vehicles on public streets in the city. That code and an administrative policy that help implement and kind of flesh out how the code works do allow for the removal from the public right of way and storage of that vehicle when a vehicle is being used for shelter, but violating the city's time, place, and manner regulations. These are the where, when, and how rules in the code. Our policy says the city will only engage in removal of a vehicle in that circumstance if we can cite significant risks to human health or safety. State law and our code and our policy have a lot of due process elements around this. We have to provide advance notice to somebody. We give them an opportunity to understand what the issues are and fix them. If we actually do remove a vehicle, we have to store it in a safe place for at least 30 days. We have to give somebody an opportunity to come get it back. We have to coordinate with contractors. Sometimes that's a tower, sometimes it's bio-related cleanup. And this should go without saying, but I put it in the presentation anyway. We're not going to remove or tow a vehicle if somebody's actually in a vehicle. You just don't do that. Important for me to say here, to this point, we have not actually done this. And that's in part because usually when there's an issue, we can get compliance. And it's in part because this is really complicated. You have to have a place to store vehicles. You have to coordinate with contractors. I will tell you that we do have places in the city where we have folks who are living in vehicles. Some of them are, I'll say, more or less operable than others, where there are accumulations of, I'd say, public health and safety issues, sometimes garbage, sometimes other things that aren't great for the people living there or the people nearby. We have not so far removed a vehicle from the right of way, but we are prepared to do that when we think it's important. So part of what we explained to council last week was that we do currently have a code and policy that allows us to do this, but we haven't really pulled the resources together to actually do it for vehicles. And that's in part because our staff, of which there are a very limited number, have really been focused since council adopted the camping code in late 2022 on applying it to what I'll call tent camping situations. I don't want to say that's easier to manage, but there's a lot of it, and our staff has spent the last year or year and a half really kind of getting a handle on that and communicating to people who are living outside how the system works, what the rules are, what they need to do to use public right of way to meet their basic needs. And we think that has gone, I hesitate to say fairly well, but it's a system that people are now understanding and working within. We are now turning our attention to applying this other aspect of our code that applies rules to vehicles, and that's what we were updating council on. So one of the things we did was provide council with a little bit of a comparison between the existing rules for vehicles and the existing rules for tents. And you can see, and when I say tent camping, I mean living outside when you're not in a vehicle. Sometimes it involves a tent, sometimes it doesn't. But as you can see, we have some different rules in terms of the time. For tent camping, people are currently under the existing system allowed to do that in one place for 24 hours at a time, and then they have to move to a new place. So they can't occupy the same place on a long-term basis. We have the same principle that applies to people using vehicles for shelter, but it's a different rule. It's a different time. It's currently 3 business days, and there isn't a clear requirement that somebody has to a particular distance. We also have some different rules on where these things can happen. For tent camping on the right, that is not allowed in areas zoned residential. You can do that in other parts of the city. For vehicles, you are currently allowed to use a vehicle for shelter in a residential area. You can see some other distinguishing elements between the rules for vehicles and tents. You can also see, if I move my cursor, the fact that there's a density limit. For the current system says for tent camping, there can be no more than 3 tents or 3 sites on a block face. We don't have that for vehicles. So these are some disparities in the rules that there may be reasons for them, but what we have experienced is our staff who are implementing this have experienced challenges applying 2 different systems and 2 sets of rules. And they've also experienced some challenges communicating the different rules and different systems to people who are using public rights of way for shelter and to other community members who are saying, what are the rules for this and what are the rules for that? So essentially, what and I'll get here, what we recommended to council last week was that they consider directing us to come back with code amendments that would align the rules for vehicles where it makes sense to the rules for tents. So we would have some of the same rules regardless of how somebody is using the public rights of way. We also recommended that council consider making some adjustments to our code based on what we're seeing in other cities. One of those things is something that's absent from our code. We don't define in our code yet vehicle habitation or vehicle sheltering or vehicle camping, whatever you call it. What does it mean? And that's important because personally, somebody pulling their car over and sleeping in it, that's somebody in a car. It's not vehicle habitation. So we recommended to council that they ask us to draft a definition or incorporate some kind of definition of the activity through our code, which is a very common thing in other cities, but we don't have that yet. And we also, and this is, I think, it's not a minor point, but we also are suggesting that we frame how we look at what I'll call place and proximity limits to residential uses. And this can get, I don't think it's too nuanced, but right now our code says, for example, for tent camping, you can't do this in areas that are zoned residential. We have residential uses in places of the city that are not zoned residential. So as zoning has gotten sort of more liberalized and more uses are allowed in more places, we might have an area that's zoned commercial or mixed use, but has housing units in it. It's more urban type of development, this sort of suburban standard that we've seen in Bend. So we have residential uses, people living housed in places that are not zoned for residential. What most cities do, to the extent they set limits on where people can camp in public rights of way, they tend to say you can do it within a certain distance or outside of a certain distance of an actual residential use, like somebody's house or somebody's apartment, rather than the zoning district. So that's another change that we have recommended that council consider. So that's an overall recommendation. This graphic just represents, again, council has not made any decisions other than saying, come back to us with what this would look like. But this is a graphic representing what staff are recommending we end up with, which ultimately is a council decision that would have more alignment between the rules for vehicles and for tents. Same time limit, same places, more or less, and incorporating a density limit. So you can't have this concentrated beyond a certain level on any block face. So I'll skip that one. This is just intended to sort of be offensive to the eyes because this is an example. It's kind of a composite example of what a definition of vehicle habitation or vehicle camping or vehicle shelter might look like. They can be long because they say essentially what other cities do. And it doesn't matter what you call it, vehicle camping, vehicle habitation, vehicle sheltering, but this is what it looks like, or these are the things that can indicate it's happening. So council has said, yeah, we should actually define in our code what this means. So come back with something. This is not the definition that is necessarily going to go back to council. This is just an example of what that definition might look like. And importantly, that second paragraph, which I'm not encouraging you to read, because what it essentially says is sleeping in your car without these other things is not vehicle camping. We do not intend to reach into what people are doing in their car beyond the extent to which we think it's important to do so. If council adopts any or all of these changes to the code, and I've got a summary slide after this one, there are some things that won't change. Advance notice is required prior to removal or forcing somebody to move. Yes.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I was gonna try to wait, but I'm gonna forget.
Okay.
On the slide prior to this,
Yes.
on that second paragraph,
Yes.
where it says, provided there are no other violations of the time, place, and
Yep.
manner regulations.
Yep.
I saw that previously as well.
Yep.
Is that referring to something like a business that has their own, they own their parking lot, and so they have their set times, that kind of stuff?
Not really. I think what it means is so what these codes do, and this is a function of state law, when a local government says we intend to regulate how people can use the right public streets to camp, we can do it through these three things: time regulations, place regulations, and manner regulations. So you can do it for this long, like in one place. That's a time regulation. You can do it like, not within 100 feet of a school. That's a place regulation. And a manner regulation would be, for example, you can do it, but you can't let garbage or debris accumulate around your car. So those are the three kind of areas that we can set rules in. We have all of those things. So what this means, that second paragraph essentially is, if you're sleeping in your car, but you haven't been there too long, so you're not violating the time, you're not in sort of the wrong place, a place that you're not allowed to do it, and you're not violating the manner regulations, and you're not leaking black water from a sewage tank into the street, and you're just sleeping in your car, you're not doing vehicle habitation. You're good. So that was important to council to have that. I won't call it a carve out, but again, we're not trying to. And the example I used to council, one of them is if you park your car legally and you read a book or scroll your phone for 8 hours or 10 hours or whatever weird thing you do in your car, who cares, right? So if you're doing that, if you're doing the same thing, but you're sleeping in your car, who cares? If you're doing the other things that look like you're living in a car, you're cooking, you're accumulating stuff, we're going to set some rules around how you do it in terms of how long, where, and how. But we want to make sure that we're not regulating presence, we're regulating an activity. So that's why we think it's important to define vehicle camping, but have at least something of a carve out. So back to things that won't change, and then I can take questions. None of these things are changing, even if our code changes to have more similar rules for vehicle intent camping. We still will have to provide and always provide advance notice prior to removal. And what that means is if the city gets a call, hey, I think somebody's been here too long, or hey, somebody's been camping there and it's been fine, but now there's a whole bunch of garbage that's accumulating around their car or their tent, or hey, they're in the wrong place, like they can't camp within 500 feet of the navigation center, something like that. What our staff do is they go out, they assess the problem, and if those violations exist, one or more of those things, we don't say, unless there's sort of what's called an emergency situation, we don't say and can't say under the law, you have to move now or else. We say and provide written notice, here are the issues. Here are the ways that you're violating the code. And in almost all cases, they have 72 hours to either fix it or move. And often you fix it by moving. So that won't change even if our code changes. That's a requirement of state law that is in our policy and that's in our code. And I see Councilor Perkins' hand is up. Do you want to jump in now or have me?
Yeah, if I could, I just want to just reiterate who the first point of contact is. The first point of contact is not a police officer. It is not someone who is armed. It is our health and safety compliance team who, if you're ever interested in doing a ride along, by the way, I know they would love to take you out with them. They treat people with compassion, and they know almost every homeless person on the streets of Bend. And I'd also, just like to emphasize that they truly do connect people with resources. They are not there just to police. And the other thing I just want to emphasize is like Ian was just saying, it is not as if on day X a tow truck appears, or in the case of tent camping, a sanitation truck appears and says, now we're taking, you have to go. This is truly about health and safety. And that is the priority with that team. I just wanted to interject.
Yeah. And this is a good reminder for me to say because we're talking about the notice required to removal, or the notice required prior to, that informs somebody of the issues and gives them time to fix them, which is sometimes moving before the city takes any action. We have not, this is how we apply our code. We go to people and we say, here are the issues, here's how you fix it, here's how much time you have to fix it. We have not once written somebody a ticket or a citation. That is a possibility under our code, because it's any violation of our municipal code for anything is potentially subject to a citation. We have not issued a single one for violation of the camping code. There are multiple reasons for that. The first and foremost among them is it doesn't really make sense, and it's not effective to tell somebody who's indigent that they owe the city $750 and have to go to municipal court. It makes no sense. It is much more effective to say, here are the issues, here's what you need to do to fix them, here's how much time you have to fix them. So that is how we apply and enforce our code. I will also say that unlike some other larger or very large cities in the state of Oregon, there's no possibility of jail time or criminal prosecution under our code. We apply it by honestly, using this leverage. Like, if you don't come into compliance, if you don't fix what the issues are, we do have the illegal ability to temporarily take your things and store them. And that is a pretty effective lever to get people to sort of understand the rules. So that's what we do. Other things that won't change, we have an ever-present obligation to consider requests to modify our programs or policies. If somebody has a disability, that's an obligation that we take seriously. We engaged in it in depth when we were dealing with some of these issues last summer. And Cassandra, who introduced herself earlier, is working on a couple of requests right now. So this usually results in giving somebody more time to comply. Not a problem. I mentioned earlier, we don't tow vehicles that are occupied, and some of these other difficulties or challenges, it's just not practical for a city like Bend anyway, to sort of jump on or pounce on someone and say, guess what, we're taking your stuff. We have due process built in. It's not what we want to do. And honestly, even if there were people that wanted to do it, we don't really have the resources to do it anyway. It doesn't make sense. We don't pursue that strategy for all sorts of reasons. And last, but importantly, if we do get to the point where somebody isn't complying and we say, oh, okay, we have to temporarily take and store your things, we tell them when we're going to do it. We give them information on how to get the stuff back. We have to store it for at least 30 days, and we do it, and we try to make it as easy as possible for somebody to come get their things, and we of course don't charge them for it. So I'm not saying it's not inconvenient, but when we have to do that, we take it and then make the things available, and that won't change either. So last slide, and then I can take questions. I won't go through this, but this is just a summary of staff's recommendations, most of which I sort of burned through over the last few minutes. Council ultimately, September 18th? God, did I say September 25th earlier? I did, sorry. Was looking at the September calendar incorrectly. Short version is council indicated they wanted us to come back with all of these things in draft code amendments. So those will be going back to council, I guess, on September 18th. Apologies for saying the 25th earlier. Still the second meeting in September. That's where we are. We had direction to essentially bring back all of this. Questions, comments?
I have a question. Cameron, she, her.
Directly into the mic.
Cameron Fisher, she, her. Tailing Jackie's questions and comments or thoughts, when you said the not sleeping in the car, but scrolling, or potentially sleeping in the car, but not camping, right?
Yep.
That limit is currently what?
You mean the current time limit for how long somebody can
They can
camp?
be parked in that spot.
Three,
They're
but-
not technically camping.
Yeah. If they're not technically camping, so this, I'll see if I can do this in a way that makes sense. City has a parking code, right? It just regulates how people park their cars. The parking code says, and this is not the camping code, parking code has a provision in it. It's not very well written because some people who don't, it's not very well written, but it essentially says you can legally park your car unless there is a specific other time limit that applies. You can legally park your car for 3 business days in the same location. What our camping code does is point to that for what I'll call vehicle camping. It says the rule in the parking code for time applies to how long somebody can use their vehicle to camp. So that means somebody can camp in a vehicle for up to 3 business days in the same location. One of the things I didn't cover, but I alluded to in an earlier slide, in a separate project, we are undertaking a rewrite of our parking code. Again, this is just
Right.
how vehicles
That
park.
last stuff.
Separate, that code is outdated, separate project, but that 3 business day rule in the parking code is likely to be retired. So it has been somewhat confusing for people to have our camping code point to and rely on the parking code, which is going to change. So some of our advice to council earlier was, whatever your time limit is for vehicle camping, should say it in the camping code instead of pointing to the parking code. So it's possible that council could have said, just have the camping code say that people can shelter in vehicles for 3 business days. The direction and recommendation at this point is to say, no, have it be 24 hours, just like it already says for tents. Is that sort of clear?
Yeah, and
Okay.
I'm having, when you put in quotes of could be sleeping in the car, but really there's nothing else happening.
Yep.
There's no cooking, there's
Yep.
no other potential
Right.
safety things, that still falls under the current parking code.
Well, yeah, I mean, I would say the way I would address that is,
Stay that way.
yes, if we have this, I keep calling it a carve out, but somebody being in their vehicle, but not doing all the vehicle habitation-y things, not having any of those signs, then it's just, is your vehicle legally parked under what the parking code says? You're not habitating, you're not camping, maybe you're in your vehicle, but the only thing the city is really going to care about in that situation is your vehicle legally parked? You know, is it, you're not camping, so it's just a parking situation.
Okay. Couple other questions, so that I just want to make sure I understand all this. And so that health and safety piece.
Yep.
That if there are all those potential dangers to health and safety, you said something like here that they share that here are the issues, here's what you need to do.
Mhm.
And do they provide supports and how to do those
Yep.
things?
So a couple things, are prioritizing removal of vehicles based on health and safety. So we have the code, which is what council controls and what council will be considering the September 18th meeting. I can't believe I got that wrong. We also have this administrative policy that's sort of, it's all the connective tissue in the code. The administrative policy says, in essence, if the city is going to consider removing a vehicle that's violating the camping code, it's been there too long, it's in the wrong place, or there are all these manner regulations, the way it's happening is wrong, we will do that by prioritizing removal based on risks to human health and safety. And that is a summary of this element of our administrative policy that says we really don't want removing a vehicle that somebody's using for shelter to be our first option. If we're going to do that, we're going to focus on what I'll call the highly problematic situation. And, you know, an example, if there are extensive manner violations, let's say somebody's been in the same place for a long time and they haven't moved, but it's a place they can legally be, but everything kind of is okay. That probably doesn't present a super apparent risk to public health or safety. But if somebody's been in a place they can legally be, but they've been there for a long time and there are repeated manner violations, I mean, all manner of issues that can crop up. If we have a situation like that and things are maybe spilling over onto a neighboring property, or maybe there are, I'm not going to go into details, but you can imagine the health, we're going to probably focus on that for a removal effort rather than the example where those things aren't present. So that's what our policy says.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
This is Jeff Kitchens, he, him. So with the notification and the potential removal and such, is there a process that will be developed, or is there a process currently if somebody wishes to say, hey, I mean, peel's the wrong word, but basically identify that they're not doing what's been identified that they're doing, and how would they go about saying, I'm not camping, I'm not doing this, please don't remove my vehicle,
Yep.
or my vehicle's broken down and
Yep.
I'm trying to get it moved,
Yep.
which we understand those are situations.
Yep.
So where is it written in? Will it be written in? Does it exist now? Some level of
Yes.
flexibility, or
Yes.
or you
That-
know, an opportunity for somebody
Yep.
to basically exercise their rights as a citizen within the
Yep.
city to.
Yep.
Yeah.
So we don't, I would say yes and no. And the no, I'll start with the no. The no is we don't, we have a municipal code that outlines how a whole range of things have to happen in the city. And you typically don't build into your code that sets rules and requirements. The opportunity for somebody to contest it is when they get a citation and they go to muni court and they say, I didn't do this, or I didn't really do it like the city said they did. So that is an opportunity to appeal or contest. With our camping code, what we have in Title IV of our municipal code, which has it has findings and a purpose of the code. It really sets out the city's philosophy on our houselessness response policy. If you get a chance, read Title IV of our muni code, especially the findings and purpose, because it outlines the city's approach to this whole issue, not just this aspect that I'm talking about of how we're regulating how public rights of way are used. That's a part of it, but in Title IV of our code, we set out what I would call the city's philosophy globally to this problem. What we have there and elsewhere in our code and in our administrative policy is, I think, a really consistent message that our enforcement approach is going to be tailored to particular circumstances. We empower our very small team to take all of these circumstances into account, and they always try to help somebody figure out what they can do to fix the issues. And they're not writing tickets. They're not issuing notices as their first option. So that idea is woven throughout our documents. And, one option, again, I alluded to this earlier, and this is a legal obligation we have, but it is built strongly into our policies and our code provisions, is oftentimes when somebody needs extra time or modification, it's related to a disability. We do not challenge somebody and say, we're not so sure that what you're telling us qualifies as a disability. You just don't do that. Somebody says they have an issue, we say, understood, what do you need? And so that is a typical pathway for this request or explanation for what somebody needs to come up. And Cassandra handles those and does a lot of due diligence, including interviewing people, going out on site, understanding what their stories are, what their circumstances are, what they need, and then seeing if we can connect them with other resources in addition to giving them more time, which we're always going to do. So I think these things are really built into our system, and we do it pretty much every day in one way or another.
Adrian?
Hi, thank you, Adrian McDougall. I just have a question on how this relates to minors. So in two ways. One, if I'm a 17-year-old parked for 3 days, do I have different rules? And then if there is a minor in the vehicle, whether they are camping or not, whether they're present or have the activity, I'm just curious what.
So I can answer some of that. I think our rules they're generally applicable rules. So they apply to everyone regardless of what their age is or their status. So these are not rules that apply only to people who might be considered to have the status of houselessness. They apply to everyone. There are what courts would call generally applicable rules. I'm trying to think if there's anything in our code that specifically references the presence of minors. I honestly can't recall, but I will say if we had a scenario where our health and safety team on the streets encountered a family situation or somebody who had a minor with them, that would absolutely be taken into account in how we engage with them and how we applied the code. And so, we do have those situations where there are, I'll say, particular family circumstances that come up, and we always take those into account. And usually that means giving somebody more time, or some type of, if it's not a formal accommodation, some understanding of what they're dealing with. And again, what they try to do is give people the information and ability to come into compliance. And we're not writing tickets. We're trying to get people to kind of understand the rules and work within the system, which I understand can be. It is not necessarily easy when you have to move, but we're trying to balance that with the issues that do tend to come when places are occupied for a long period of time.
This is Jackie. Question about, I'm thinking about how to word this and it's not, I'm gonna make some people mad. Sprinter vans.
Yep.
People are literally
Yep.
camping in their
Yep.
car, not living in their car,
Yep.
right? And I mean, all over Bend.
Yes, yes.
And that's great. I have friends who do it. I don't care. That's fine. But I am wondering how there's a lot of people that will see that and not care.
Or
And
not
then
call.
Or
right.
not call
Yep.
because they don't care because it's pretty, it's shiny, whatever.
Yep.
And see something else and
Yes.
then call even if it's not a problem.
Yes.
And then there's things about like people in these vans, whatever, taking up space.
Mhm.
If we're now reducing only 3 per block and instead of increasing cars to 3 days, reducing that to 24 hours,
Yep.
it's just creating more inaccessibility and more inequity around.
On the Sprinter van question, which it has come up internally, we've talked about this, without revealing what I've said or advised any clients, I will tell you that if whether or not these changes are made, I hope we get calls about somebody camping in a Sprinter van so we can respond to it and demonstrate that these are generally applicable rules. Our system is largely complaint-based. You are right. People tend to call about some things more than they call about others. I'm not sure what I can do about that other than emphasize something I just said. These are generally applicable rules. And if somebody is in a 6-figure Sprinter van and we adopt a definition of vehicle habitation and they're cooking, they're doing things that look like vehicle habitation, and we get a call because a neighbor is tired or maybe they're resentful that they don't have a Sprinter van and their neighbor does, and they call, our advice, our office's advice is going to be apply the code the same way to the well-to-do person in their Sprinter van. Now, they're going to get the same opportunity, the same notice, the same opportunity to move. And, I think the reality is, in theory, it's probably going to be easy for them to do it, maybe easier than it is for some people, but we will address that. That's a challenge or an issue that we have to think about with the current code, as well as if it changes. But, we have set this up intentionally to be a system of generally applicable rules that apply to everyone using the right of way for this activity. But yes, that is something we think about too.
This is Cameron. So with regard to the safe parking, can you tell me the difference between units and beds?
Like on an earlier slide,
Yeah.
I don't think there is a difference.
Okay.
And so
Just
as far as I know, we have 16, I want to say slots, 16 places currently.
And how often are there vacancies?
Good question. I think on one of the earlier slides, I'm going to scroll up one by one. The utilization rate is quite high. And I think that suggests that the answer to your question is, I guess, twofold. Not often. And it's another reason we need more spots because those are 90% plus utilization rates. So under 10% of the time space, that's how I'm interpreting that. But our housing folks would be able to correct me. They're not here, but again, I think it's pretty clear that we need people to come in. The application process is actually pretty simple. It doesn't involve a land use application. It's something that we do administratively through our housing department and then the city manager's office. Relatively simple as far as bureaucratic local government applications go. So come in, bring an application in and let's get more spots.
So that, of course, we're all hoping that the county and
Yes.
city can work together to make
Yes.
more, because for me, I get the dire health and safety issues that might pop up. There's a good chance that just because we're moving them around doesn't mean they're going to have the exact same health and
Right.
safety issues. It's actually making it much more challenging for folks to go more frequently to keep moving if there's nowhere to go. And so I guess that's my kind of frustration of just seeing this moving forward on going down to the 24 hours like tent camping when there are no other, what does this actually solve except maybe alleviating some of those, frustrated calls from that person's neighborhood, but they can come back. and they will go to the next neighborhood and
Yep.
the next neighborhood. And it causes more challenge for the folks who are trying to live their lives like that. Then it's very different than a tent, right? So I guess, it seems frustrating to me to see this kind of push when there's no other option. It doesn't really solve anything, but maybe like alleviate some complaining in one area, and then there'll be others in other areas. I don't know the solution, but
I don't necessarily disagree. I do think, and this is me being a little bit anecdotal, I think when you have, when things are static, we have seen and other cities have seen, you do tend to see some deterioration when things are static and a place is occupied for
many days.
a lengthy period of time. And so things accumulate. We've seen this, we used to see this with larger sort of outdoor camps in the city, which under our code, we don't see as much of anymore because it doesn't really allow for that. People can use spaces, but they can't, I keep using the word occupy, and I don't mean that to be a loaded term, but when people kind of take a space and don't move, it excludes others and it tends to create these static conditions that tend to deteriorate. And I understand that making people move frequently, it creates a burden, maybe a pressure, maybe an obligation, but it also mitigates some of those negative conditions that tend to crop up when people are in the same place for a long time. It's a balance. It's not perfect, but yes, what these changes would require people living in vehicles to move a bit more often, but there's still, I will say, a significant amount of public streets in the city where people can engage in this activity. It's just can't be as static as staying in one place for like a year, which is what we've seen in some places. And we've seen some conditions get not great, including for people who are living right there on Watt Way in Northeast Bend in apartments that aren't really the nicest, probably the highest end apartments in Bend. So some of these folks have had some negative conditions right outside of their patios for a year. And we are trying to create a system that accounts for that too, because that's an impact on people who, don't live maybe in $1 million homes somewhere else. So that's something that we kind of have to consider in terms of where these things are happening.
I guess that's
So I'm gonna jump in and just because I don't want to run out of time, and so I'm gonna I'm gonna reach out and see if any of our commissioners who have not offered a voice yet have a perspective or a thought or a question for Ian. Please go ahead, Carolyn.
I said no. I pretty much got my question answered already.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Oh, go ahead.
Agatha?
Hi, Agatha Ventura, she, her. And my question is around the safe parking and what sort of outreach is happening to action on that and to try to find more people or more organizations, I guess, with space to do that.
So she's not here, but Amy Fraley, Fraley, in our housing department is probably the person to contact on that. I know Amy and others in our housing department are out in the community all the time trying to drum up interest in participating in the program. All of you are welcome and encouraged to do that. If you have ideas or thoughts, you can connect with Amy Fraley or connect people you know to Amy, because we need more safe parking in the city and outside the city. And, there's urban safe parking, which is what our program does. There's also the idea of managed camps in less urban settings, which the city is going to be collaborating with the county on facilitating more of.
Thank you.
Is there any incentive to folks?
Yeah, that's what I was getting. So before we go, I'm gonna ask next that Mayor Pro Tem Megan Perkins offer her perspectives. I know some questions came about from the beginning, I think, Cameron, from you on what the public has been saying or what some of the responses have been. I think it would be really good to hear that now, and then we can have time for discussion on our end.
Sure, and I apologize if my service keeps going in and out. I think we're hearing a lot from people, particularly in areas that have a high density of RVs. Particularly, there's some activity on First and Second Street, and then you've heard a lot about Watt Way. Some of those RVs have been there for over a year, and one of the things that I think about during this conversation is that they are parked outside of some low-income apartments, and there have been some health and safety issues there, and the needing to balance the safety and the humanity of the people that are living in the RVs, but also the safety and the humanity of the people that are living in those apartments. And that's something that I think about when we're having these conversations. And as far as capacity building, we are doing our absolute best to build as much capacity as we can. The Safe Parking program is a program we're trying to highlight because it is highly successful at getting people into stable housing, and has a waiting list that is very, very long. And it's something that really falls into the mission of religious institutions, but it should also fall in the mission, I believe, of our businesses as well. So just want to highlight those couple of things.
Wait, what has a waiting list?
Safe parking program. There are more people than spots.
I think I misunderstood what
Those are the
safe
16
parking
we're
even
talking about.
means.
Yeah.
So people have to apply to.
Well, he was referring to getting more interest in providing safe parking.
Right, but then there's like a program to help people that are using safe parking to get into housing.
Yes.
Yes.
There's a management.
Go ahead.
There's a management component of our safe parking program, and that has been fairly, of all the different shelter and of all the different options out there, safe parking has been particularly effective through that case management and contact and referral element of it, and getting people transitioned from wherever they were before to these safe parking opportunities into more stable housing. So we've had a pretty high success rate there, and which is, again, big reason we need more of it.
Yeah, it is by definition a high barrier program, which is why we're able to put it in church parking lots, because they have to go through a service provider in order to be there. And then the churches or the businesses could say, we want our safe parking program to be families, or we want our safe parking program to be seniors. And so they can really sort of cultivate and craft the type of program that they think would align best with their congregation and their mission.
And Megan, this is Cameron, and I know like a lot of religious or churches are doing that out of the goodness of their hearts. That's sort of, they're thinking about that. Is there some sort of other way, or are there other incentives that are on the table? Would be insane.
Nope, just assistance from the city in terms of coordinating and setting it up. But nope, it is something that is aligned with their mission, and we would hope that more would take the opportunity.
And businesses too, right?
Yes.
That's what you're.
Yes, absolutely. There's a lot of parking lots in town.
Yes.
Would you tell me the name of the program again? Carolyn Peacock Biggs.
Yeah, it's in our code. It's just called the Safe Parking Program, and if anybody's interested, it's in Title 4 of our municipal code, which again has our sort of findings and philosophy about this issue globally, and then a section on the safe parking program and how it works, and then a section on what people call the camping code, which is how we regulate public right of way. So it's all in Title 4 of our code, but this is the safe parking program.
And that's not limited to 24 hours.
Thank you.
Our 24-hour limit, most of what I've been talking about, that's on public streets. Safe parking is for a parking lot or a private property or a property owned by some entity that wants to make it available under our program.
Adrian?
Hi, thank you. Curious, and I apologize if this was already mentioned, how do members in the community who need this resource, how do they find out about safe parking? Is it, like boots on the ground? And then is there, and I don't know if this is a silly question or not, but is there a way, like would I know which businesses participate in this program. And I ask intentionally because I may choose to patron that over one business over the other to like support them in being a part of the program. So I guess I have two questions.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
maybe start with the second one. Right now, I think we only have churches.
Yes, we do. Only churches right now.
Institutions are participating. So, you know, the way, I mean, awareness of the program, people connected with the church or that the church connects with, become aware of the program. What we need, and as Mayor Pro Tem Perkins was emphasizing, this program is not just for churches. This is right in the strike zone of what churches traditionally do. We know that, we understand that. I think are not surprised that churches have been sort of the early interested parties in this, but it's not limited to churches. It's anybody who owns property that can come in under this program or leases or controls. So if you've got property and you've got parking spaces, even a couple, I mean, a lot of these places, it's two parking spaces in an otherwise huge parking lot that somebody has decided could be put to this purpose. So we need people to try it. And we can certainly connect interested parties with the entities that are involved in this program to talk about the experience they've had, which has been pretty positive mostly.
So I have a question. So this is a very important issue for which I am hearing from Mayor Pro Tem Perkins that having perspectives from HREC would be very helpful. I'm gonna look to Megan, you and the city's equity department on a suggestion for how best we can review the information and provide response, input, feedback, either as a collective or individually.
So I'll go ahead and touch on that. Andres Portela, Equity and Inclusion Director. If you've seen me on my phone, Mayor Pro Tem and I have been texting on how do we get information in case she dropped off. One of the suggestions that she had come up with was writing a memo as we approach the September 18th conversation at council and thinking about how do we apply the code the same, looking at need for more spot, but then also using it as a point of advocacy for more parking spaces and doing outreach. So there's a combination of writing something and that goes into the conversation we'll have a little bit around policy advocacy and the role of HREC in advising council. Those are things we can do. We can write council and that as a formal suggestion.
I think that would be great.
All I would ask is for some leadership on who I can connect with on HREC who wants to hold part of that work, and we can work through that together.
I'm happy to volunteer to help work with you on this. This is Jeff Kitchens, he, him. And if there's somebody else, we could pull that together and write it, and then it could come from HREC to the city.
By the 18th.
I'm happy to support.
This is Adrienne. I'm also happy to support.
And this is Agatha. Sorry about that.
I'm assuming I'm going to look again to you, Andres, that we would draft something, run it through council for review, either via email or whatever that process is, and then be able to finalize it and ready to submit by the 18th. Is that what we would expect the process to be?
So if I'm understanding what you're asking me correctly, the process would be is there a motion or something on the floor in which HREC would say that they would like to formally write a letter and submit that to council for the September 18th council meeting? That is what I'm positioning back, but if there's a different process.
I think what I was asking, okay, so I'll ask this differently. Before making a motion, just the process, can we, and this is where I'm probably going to look to you and Ian, is outside of the nexus of this meeting, are we able to write the memorandum, send it through this council for review to provide feedback and then submit it? Or is that something that we would have to have a meeting to review and approve that's where I'm kind of in this little gray area that I want to understand
Yeah.
it before I make
I
a
would-
motion.
So when's the next HREC meeting? The September HREC meeting?
After September 18th.
After 18th.
So because of that, and apologies for being this kind of lawyer.
No, that's what we need.
But yeah, the group, the committee as a whole can only act in a notice public meeting, about acting, making a decision. So I am thinking through whether it would be possible for HREC tonight to designate a couple of members, maybe less than a quorum, to work with staff on a letter to council. That is possible, but it would have to be clear that it was from a couple of HREC members who were designated or delegated with the task, and it wasn't from the full HREC, because there's really no opportunity to send a few of you away to work on a letter and then have HREC as a whole weigh in on it outside of another public meeting. So I think there's a way to do it. It would be a little bit qualified, and it probably wouldn't be a letter from all of HREC. It would be maybe a couple of you that the group as a whole was comfortable delegating the responsibility to, and that might be something we could do.
One thing, if I could interject, the core area advisory board did recently, because they had the same issue, was they sort of nominated a couple people to write the letter, but they all agreed on, 2 or 3 bullet points that they wanted to include at the meeting. So you could do that tonight too. That would be another option.
So I'd like to seek discussion from the committee on this topic, specifically with the idea of potentially writing a memorandum, potentially asking 2 or 3 members that would not equate to quorum to represent the commission, and creating some statements or both as a commission tonight that could be within that letter. I think it's important that we as a group discuss this, because all of us spoke tonight at one point or another with feedback and viewpoint. That's important. So, and I'm going to throw that out for discussion.
This is Cameron Sheeher. One thing that I would really love to have included in that is or something to the effect that HREC is strongly advocating for more not only awareness or some sort of incentivizing for folks to offer more safe parking opportunities. I think that would be worth sharing that information. And are you looking, Jeff, to just have everybody kind of throw in something that's of interest or importance to them?
Anyone and everyone who wishes to share a perspective and speak is welcome as part of HREC on this topic.
But you're saying typically to put in the letter to the council?
I think 3 things. One, are folks interested in doing the letter? I think that's important. 2, if we are not, we don't have a letter to review and agree to tonight. So our council supportive of the idea of having a number less than quorum represent the council and write that memo and have it submitted. And then 3, if those 2 are a yes, then what sort of ideas, thoughts like to have in that memo? So the first really is, do we want to do the memo? Is there anyone opposed to the idea? And second, thoughts and suggestions around the idea of asking 2 or 3 of us to represent HREC to make the memo happen with Andres and others from the city supporting.
Jackie, would there be possibility, I mean, I love the idea of, something being able to go to them. And if it like on behalf of the council, is there a way for the people who aren't directly participating to at least like review that first or offer some type of, I mean, I don't love my name just being put on something without me knowing what it says.
So
Right? Like-
yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I'll say no, but, so I think.
Great question.
Bad,
Thank you.
yeah, bad news, good news. Bad news for, what I would envision if HREC wants to do this, which I sense there's some gravity towards figuring out how to do this. I could envision a letter, let's say two of you are designated to work with staff on a letter by the group as a whole tonight, and the group as a whole tonight says, we'd like the letter to at least incorporate these 2 or 3 or 4 things. If that's where you get, I envision that eventual letter saying, this letter is from Cameron and Jeff, not the whole HREC, but we've been delegated by the HREC to represent these thoughts. And we did this at our August 28th meeting. So while this isn't from the HREC as a whole, we did talk about this at the August 28th meeting and agreed that these 3 or 4 things were really important for council to consider, but it won't be signed by the HREC. So I think there's a way to contextualize and qualify that letter and reflect what actually happened, so that if, there's a member who's not part of that group, their name isn't going to be on the letter, but they'll be participating in the discussion tonight. Does that make sense? Okay.
Yes.
We do that.
Okay.
Yeah, if there's 3, it was Agatha, Adrian, and Jeff. That they're the committee on this and they've heard some input. They can also circle back with individuals and get a little bit more input.
That's challenging
Individually.
it's challenging from a public meetings perspective, but as staff, Andres and
Andres can
I
do
can
it.
help. We can help manage that.
I
and-
mean,
Yeah.
to put it on,
Yeah,
but
we-
you can communicate independently without it being a quorum. You can just check for feedback if folks weren't here. For example, if Jasmine weren't on, and you can say, hey, is there anything you want to add to this thought? That's not a public meeting.
It's not, but we do have to be careful about what some courts would consider drifting towards serial meetings where information goes from here to here to here. So I want to qualify that a little bit, but if we get enough input and direction from the group as a whole tonight, I'm confident we can come up with something that will generally reflect at least the basic ideas that the group as a whole thinks are important.
It's great.
Okay.
What was that?
Agatha?
Agatha Ventura, she, her. Given the timeline that we're looking at, I would support the letter, and as I mentioned, would be happy to be on the committee to help write it. And want to put on the table, I feel some of the things that came up as we were discussing were being mindful around. I liked what you said around not regulating presence, but regulating an activity. And I feel like context plays a role in that, as we talked about, whether it's a big camper, the activity that's happening around it. So I would like to ask the group to help me put into English how we're asking to keep it in mind social context when putting this into practice.
Jackie. Sometimes I'm not so great with nuance. Are you asking for support right now, or as you 3 move to write a letter? Do we call for a vote to write a letter now, so that's official, so that we can move forward to do it?
Yes. Yes, so anyone here is welcome to make a motion.
Yes, Carolyn Peacock Big, I motion that we make a vote to put this letter together today.
Agatha Ventura, I second that motion.
Okay, I'm gonna try to wordsmith a motion and just see if we can, this is something that we can get approval on. So I'm gonna work with what you just provided Carolyn and what Agatha seconded and say that the Human Rights and Equity Commission make a motion. Right, this is I say it, so I know what I'm saying. Make a motion to provide or to have commissioners Jeff Kitchens.
Can we limit it to 2?
Oh, you can.
Let's do, if you're willing to do that, let's limit it to 2.
I can allow Jeff and Agatha this opportunity. This is Adrian.
Thank you.
Is that your not it? Okay, so
Did I say that correctly? You got what I was putting down? Got it.
yeah. Human Rights and Equity Commission make a motion to have Commissioners Jeff Kitchens, and Agatha Ventura represent the commission in writing a memorandum to City Council to be presented on September 18th regarding, and this is where I'm gonna need help from Ian, is it adjustments to the existing camping code, to the new camping code?
Potential amendments to the camping code.
To the potential amendments to the city's camping code.
Is it Jackie? Are you saying 3 or less is non-quorum, right?
I'm trying to keep as far away from a quorum or potential quorum as possible. And also honestly, just to manage the process and make it easier for staff to work with a couple of you rather than more.
3 though is.
I honestly lose track of how many HREC members we have at any given point. So I'm just trying to stay as far away from it as possible.
5 is quorum.
Okay.
5 is quorum, so that would be below quorum and below a majority of quorum.
This is still Jackie. I mean, I hear you, and I would prefer more voices if a third person is able and willing and wanting. I mean,
I just give advice here.
There's a motion and a second on the floor.
Just for clarification, I'm taking notes this evening. Would Chair Kitchen's potential motion that sits on your floor on the dais, are you looking to submit the recommendation of the memorandum on the 18th or ahead of and prior to for council's consideration or contemplation purposes?
That one.
Yeah.
There's a motion and second on the floor.
Okay. So we have a motion. We have a second. I'm gonna, as part of the rules of order, offer additional discussion for which I heard my fellow commissioner over here, the opportunity or the suggestion to include an additional voice in the writing of the letter. Discussion on that. Do folks feel agree with that? Do we want to have another? Are we good with 2? How do we feel as a commission?
Carolyn Peacock Biggs, as it relates to the number of people that are representing us, at the advice of city attorney, and 2 people speaking on behalf of us would be sufficient. That's just a recommendation that I have.
Other thoughts?
With soliciting thoughts from everybody,
Yes, definitely.
with Andres's guidance. I think that's.
And to be clear, this eventual letter is going to be reflecting some of the discussion tonight, but it's because it won't be an HREC decision. It won't be actually representing HREC. It'll be a number of commissioners working with staff reflecting some of this discussion and the ideas that HREC decides tonight should be incorporated.
Perfect.
Okay. Any other discussion? Okay. Can we have the motion reread for the group before we vote so everybody knows exactly what we're voting on?
This is Cassandra. I believe, Chair Kitchens, that you had HREC make a motion to have Commissioners Jeff Kitchen and Agatha Ventura represent the commission in writing and grant them. The city council will be presented on September 18th to the potential amendments to the city's camping code.
And you had amended that to be submitted prior to for their consideration.
The date that you'd like inserted instead, or just prior?
Prior consideration, I think is good.
So there's a motion.
It's been seconded, yes. Yeah. Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Abstentions? And anyone opposed? Okay, motion passes. So I'm gonna ask for the group. I know that we talked about the city equity department and Andres working to talk to commissioners and get input. I think it's also important, though, that as a body tonight, if we wish to, and I understand we're over the time for this agenda item and we had other agenda items, and I also understand the importance of flexible and wanting to focus on those things that are now and being a little nimble. So I'm going to look to Andres. If you're all right, I'd like to have a little conversation with council on this topic and maybe come to prior to the end of the meeting where we can have at least a few key points that we can make sure are in that letter that folks know will be in that letter. Does that sound good to everyone?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to start this discussion, though, hopefully maybe providing a little bit of input in from what I've heard from everyone talking this evening that might help us get there a little closer. So I think some of the points that I've heard that are really important this evening that I want to sort of encapsulate briefly, and I may stumble on this, so I'll ask others to help me clarify. First is that it is very important that that whatever amendments are made to the camping rules, camping laws, that how they are implemented is done in an equitable manner. The example of different vehicles being brought up, the example of different people being in different places, things like that. So there is an encouragement and a want for equitability in how this is. I also heard of an encouragement and a want for advocacy. This is for both encouraging more of the safe parking, but also I think advocating for people's individual rights as this is being implemented. So I had those kind of two nuances this evening. I wanted to highlight those. Considering the social context of what we're doing. And I think it's also just important to highlight one piece that I heard, and I heard it also the last time we talked about this. I'm going to look back to my notes really briefly for this one. I'll bring it up later. I can't find it right now, but it was, it was ensuring that those, that the things that have been highlighted that aren't going to change, just the reiteration and the clarification of what that means, like not towing vehicles with people in them, things like that, just re-highlighting the importance of those elements that are already standing and that those don't get changed, that we understand are important and a part of the, treating people as human. So those are some of the things I heard this evening. I probably did not put them out in such a way that we would put them in a letter, but they at least highlight them for further discussion. So I'd like to open it up and hear from thoughts from our fellow commissioners on elements that they believe should be in the letter, in the memo.
This is Jackie. I feel like brief amount of time to really talk about this in any like good way. So I guess like what I could just offer right now is like one personal point, I guess, that I could like add or something.
Please.
And so since we are looking kind of I guess to keep in this box of like 24 hours and 3 days, since the proposed is to decrease to 24 hours, I would propose, or whatever we're writing it as, to make it 2 days, right? Like increase this one, decrease that one, meet in the middle. Why not? Folks, 24 hours is a very brief amount to stay in one place when you're struggling with houselessness, food insecurity, et cetera, et cetera. But
Other thoughts from commissioners on the suggestion of hours instead of 24 and making that just sort of as part of the recommendation of the letter?
This is Cameron, my recommendation is to not make a change from 3 to 1 day until there are sufficient number of, at least more than 10% turnover of vacancy rates for the managed camps. For safe parking. And that with the exception of, and I think what I'm hearing is already this exists, with the exception of a significant concern about health and safety. And Ian gave some of those examples. And so I guess that seems reasonable to me at this point, but that's my thought.
Other thoughts and perspectives?
One more thing to add to my previous comment is encouraging, and I don't know how this looks, some sort of strategizing on incentivizing businesses and others beyond communities of faith to buy in to safe parking opportunities. And again, I don't know how that looks, but I'm sure there's lots of good stuff out there, and I'm just wondering, can that be considered further? And maybe it already has, I just don't know.
This is Adrian, and I don't know that it's necessarily, I'm sort of thinking out loud. I don't know if it's an element of this letter. I find myself having a hard time giving my perspective because I don't feel, and maybe this is just, I need to be more educated on these things. Like there's a lot of data that I want. And so like, I'm curious, like what does EMS say? Have there been, how many calls have they not been able to get into somebody's house because there's too many RVs parked, right? I don't know. I'm just, that's just one thing that's popped into my head. So from the HREC perspective, as we're trying to make sure that everybody has a voice at the table and we're making informed decisions, is there a way that this information, and maybe it's available publicly and I just am ignorant to it and I need to become not ignorant to it. So that's, I think that's like I was saying, it's not a formed thought quite yet, but I really want to give an educated perspective on this, and I find myself really wanting a lot more information. So I don't know if that, I guess the question around that, and perhaps the perspective of the letter is, could there be more, as you're gaining public perspective, is there an opportunity to have, more information about it. I don't know if what I'm saying is making sense. It's making sense in my head, but somebody help me here if it's not.
I think you're making great sense. I have a question, maybe a clarification. Is City Council on September 18th making a decision on the amendments?
That'll be up to the council. So we'll be bringing an ordinance with proposed code amendments based on council's direction. That's what we would call under our system the first reading of an ordinance. Every ordinance is required to undergo 2 readings. It will be up to council whether they want to approve the first reading or send it back to the drawing board or do something different. So I can't commit to what council will do at the 18th, but we have some direction from them and we'll be bringing something to them on the 18th consistent with that direction for the first reading of the ordinance.
My reason for asking is, and it's probably clear, but I'll just be clear about it, is that if there was an opportunity to extend our ability to provide this memorandum and hearing just gonna say it, the discomfort of council, of the commissioners to provide final feedback tonight, it would be great if we had the opportunity to draft the memorandum between now and our next meeting the week following the 18th, and have that provided to our commission by the 18th and then get comments back from this commission so that we could then make a vote on the final on the 25th. And I hear you loud and clear, Ian, that council may decide to approve those amendments and then we would be behind in making any kind of a recommendation. So hopefully that answers a little bit for you, Adrian, and sort of the understanding of context and timing, and that was also helpful for myself.
This is Jackie. I will express frustration by saying this is a situation that doesn't feel like City Council is looking for our input if at the next meeting it is potentially being decided and this is just now here.
This is Adrian. Could that be, I don't think I had the words, so thank you, Jackie, that I suppose I'm feeling the same way. Could that be part of our letter, is asking the council to allow us more time to give input?
It's yours to decide. So yeah.
Ours.
What's in?
I'm going to reach out to my vice chair and ask her for her thoughts to the group.
Here's my take on it. Carolyn Peacock Biggs, and please excuse me, I'm eating a cookie. We want to give, I mean, as a committee, we want to give our input. Now, we've come a long way from not even having a voice to having a voice. Maybe our next step would include being more involved in the earlier processes for right now, where we are right now, just to be able to be a part of their forum and have a voice is probably as much as we're going to get out of this one right here. With the intent that our future goal is to have somebody available on the front end, like on the first 2-3 tiers of this process. But at this stage, the meeting is the 18th, and I'm thinking that we should just give an opinion and let that be our opinion for this particular thing. And as we move forward and we solidify where we're going to be in the beginning stages, because it's kind of a late process to ask someone who is planning on making some decisions on the 18th that freeze, we want to talk about it, that we passed that phase on where they are now. So my suggestion is we write a letter letting them know that what we were considering and thinking based on the amount of time that we have and the information that we have as of today. And that's the best we're going to do for today's meeting. And then in future, when we get a situation where we do have it before it's time to meet and before they have a meeting date, then maybe we could actually implement something a little bit different. But for this one, just to be able to have a voice, I think that's probably as much as we're going to be able to get on this particular topic.
Thank you, Carolyn. Question for Ian and Andres. Does anything prevent, so let's say we have the presentation you provided tonight, Ian, and the information that gets sent out to our commissioners. Each commissioner has the opportunity, whether they're here tonight or not, to review that. They then decide to send their perspectives and thoughts on that individually, not as a collective, not to the whole council or to the commission, to Andres to provide those perspectives.
Not really.
No,
It can't work that way.
it cannot work that way. Okay, that's what I wanted to
I
clarify.
might suggest you consider, two thoughts. One, I think there are probably several elements up on the screen that most of you think are important and agree with. So I would suggest that maybe you focus on a few of those on which there's consensus. And this is, I think, consistent with the vice chair's general idea. Another thing you can always write an individual letter to the council and say,
There we go.
I'm an HREC member. This is from me, but at the August 28th HREC meeting, we talked about this and I thought this and I think this about these code amendments. That might be something that you could consider doing individually if this process, which is cumbersome because the public meetings law is just too challenging. You can do two things in that letter. It's fine to say you're a member of the HREC. It's important to say you're writing as an individual. That might be a way for those of you who are interested to express particular viewpoints to just do it on your own.
Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you.
Additionally, I think it's extremely important that HREC says something, whether it's this letter in this moment, and we get consensus on what we prioritize. But I also think thinking about long term, if I'm understanding what Ian said correctly, this would be a initial vote, and there would have to be a public hearing for this, so it would come back up at some other point.
Yeah, we don't call it a public hearing for a municipal code ordinance, but it's at the first reading.
First reading.
But there's certainly an opportunity for people to speak at the visitor section about what they think of this potential ordinance, any community member, including any of you.
So here's what I would suggest. I think coming up with a draft that we can share before the next council meeting. So continuing down this road and doing some prioritization right after this. But I think additionally, we start looking a little bit further beyond that and drafting maybe a second letter or something that we can bring into the next meeting, do a little bit of a wordsmithing, and then at the first read, we go ahead and submit this as well. So that would be my suggestion. But I can lead prioritization if that's what you want, based on some of the things we're spoken into the space, so we can have a letter to share with council at September 18th.
So I'm going to throw a few thoughts out after hearing what everyone has said. First, I agree with Carolyn. I think it's important that we provide a voice. I think based upon the past, having myself and Agatha work to take some of the points that we've provided tonight, integrate those into a short memorandum that we give to council for their consideration ahead of the 18th, saying that it is that we ourselves were asked to represent, and put that into the record, I think is an important step in us showing that we have a voice. I think it's also important to acknowledge that everyone here has the right, as Ian suggested, to put forth also a letter that we can get the information from tonight for everyone here. And that in addition to the memo that we will submit based upon the motion that was passed, anyone and everyone can also send that in. And I like the idea of working basically right after that to, if for whatever reason they don't pass something on the 18th, then we have a very easy opportunity to take the letter that's already been drafted, have that circulated to this group for review, and pass something that comes from all of HREC with all of our names on the 25th. And then that can also go forward either then or as something in the future. So that, I think, in my perspective, is where I feel most comfortable. And I feel like we're all getting an opportunity and we're providing a voice and showing that HREC is showing up. So those are my thoughts. And I also am fully in agreement with everyone that it is uncomfortable and to try to pull this together in the timing and the the nuances, as it is important.
Cameron, she, her. I would really love it if the two of you who are writing this add what Jackie mentioned as a concern. I too have that concern because it defeats the whole purpose of what HREC is existing to do, is to help advise City Council on issues of equity and advocacy. And so for future things that have anything to do with the parameters of HREC, to give a better heads up. And I know City Council has tons going on, but that really needs to be a priority. I've experienced this in past years and with this as well. And we've also, HREC has done a letter in the past on certain similar issues, and we had to scramble very quickly, and we did put together a letter. But I just think that's really important, and this is a perfect opportunity that, just like what you were saying, what Carolyn said, it's still an opportunity for voice, but to add that in there as well, because I think that's a very reasonable request and expectation.
Well said. With about 7 minutes left for the meeting, I'd like to ask if there are any other thoughts or points, and please take a moment to look at what Andres has put on the screen. He's done an excellent job of trying to summarize our various thoughts as they're flying out from different directions. So it's much appreciated. Please take a look at those and think for a moment if there's anything additional you would like for consideration into this letter. As part of this public meeting, this is a great time to put that forth, and it will be in the record of this meeting that it was put forth and suggested.
Agatha?
Agatha Ventura, she, her. One note that Adrian, you might have touched on about whether this information, whether even the current ordinances are accessible to people, and do people know what they are? So I think that's one question for me, is with these changes, if someone's coming into town for the weekend and staying, how are they aware of what's allowed, what's not allowed? Is it only when someone calls that it's a problem? How is it being not tracked, but
Any other last thoughts? Very much appreciate the discussion tonight. This was an excellent discussion. I think an excellent way of doing business. I also appreciate that we took time to hear each other's thoughts and ideas and work through a process as a team. I think that is an excellent way of doing business. I will close this out with a thought, and that is something that was shared with me many years ago in doing work for diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. We don't always have to wait to put forth our voice for when there's a vote. So as future things come up, people come to present. I think if we know from history that we will be shared these things when they need a vote, it's sort of the last minute. For us, it is kind of last minute because we meet only once a month. It's an opportunity as things are brought to us to say, you know, that is something that is important that we should, as a commission, put forth a perspective or a voice or a response to City Council. We can do that. They want us to do that. That's been made very clear by Mayor Pro Tem Megan Perkins, Andres, and others. So let's consider that for the future. We don't have to wait till there's a vote. In fact, what we have to say is important, and we can put it forth at any time. All righty. We totally missed work plan, so we will definitely want to work on that next time. And Andres, thank you very much for all the work you did to prepare for that. And thanks everyone for being nimble and willing to take on this important issue tonight. I'm gonna go to it. I feel like we ourselves have had an excellent opportunity for a roundtable discussion. So if the commission is okay with it, I'd like to turn it over to Andres so that the equity department can provide their updates before we have to adjourn. All righty. Andres, the floor is yours.
Perfect. Thank you. I will be brief. Thank you all for engaging in that conversation. As Chair Kitchens has said, it's rough, but I appreciate the bravery that it took to have that conversation. In that though, we didn't get to the work plan discussion, but I want us to do this. Can we take a second, either at the conclusion of this, not together, but start to think about what are the norms that we need as a collective to have these conversations? What do you need before this meeting? What do you need during this meeting? What are the things that I can provide or staff can provide to make sure you have a good entryway into this conversation? And so if you can debrief that just a little bit post this meeting, you don't have to share it back immediately. I'm going to ask during the next meeting. I have a chart paper in the room so that next time we can start off with the conversation around norms in our work plan and just assimilate having that a part of our collective giving for the space. So moving us forward to equity department updates, I want to say thank you for the folks who showed up. Adrian, commissioners, thank you for being in this space and helping us out with City Fest. It was a wonderful event. Equity staff was super excited to engage with the folks from ATREC who helped us out so much. Additionally, the advisory committee survey, we've had 51 respondents. I'm going to share back at the end of this meeting the link to this, but there was an email shared with all of you for the advisory committee survey. We, as a body, gave recommendation to understand the composition of advisory committees for the whole city as a part of the stipends program update. So this is city staff reacting and saying, well, city staff at the direction of council to react and start better understanding the composition. And we plan on reporting back soon. But in order to report back, we need folks to take the survey. So if you haven't done so already, you'll get it in the follow-up email. We hope that you take some time to do that. And please stop me. I am talking fast, but I'm going to try to get through this fairly quickly so I'm not over time. We have Welcoming Week coming up. That will be in a press release tomorrow. It is also on the City of Bend webpage. I'll make sure that everyone has to it. But Welcoming Week is a time in which we celebrate all folks and making sure that they feel welcome in within the City of Bend. In council right now, we have different languages saying you are welcome as a part of the Welcoming Week national initiative. And so here's the calendar. It's going to begin September 13th and go through September 28th. So it's longer than a week. And in that, we're going to have so many different ways to engage. Vamanos Outside is putting on a climb night. We have some Pixar movies in Spanish. We have multilingual skate night. Additionally, we have some screenings of films. Neighbor Impact is doing a housing fair. We have another movie, Hotel for Dogs. Additionally, we have restorative justice circles, the Journey of Monarchs, and then additionally, we have a Spanish-centric version of what's going to take place the day prior, taking place on the 21st. I'm super excited about that. Then we have Volunteers in Medicine and a health fair. We have the Loteria event at Bend PD. Additionally, we have the Envision Bend Belonging event. More information is to come on that. Additionally, we have OSU Cascades holding Mes de la Cultura celebration, and then the confidence screening again as well. So 10 amazing events. There's probably more that I left off of this. Don't worry, it'll be on our website. But we would love to see ATREC members. We are going to encourage. Our counselors have already stated that they want to be in this space. So there's a deep energy around that. Equity staff will be in all the spaces. Comm staff will be in the spaces and all staff as well. So we're super excited for that coming up. And with that, I give it back to the chair.
Very much. Right. To close this out, I'm just going to throw out a few of the bin items just briefly. One, we did make a decision this evening. As a group, we had a motion passed and we will be submitting a memo or letter with the support of the Equity Department to the City Council for ahead of their 18th on the amendments to the camping codes. It would be helpful if Ian's presentation that he provided tonight, the PDF is sent to all of the commissioners. Also, if there are links, so it's just easy access to where all the different codes and things are that were referenced tonight, if we could get those as well.
Of course.
That would be excellent. And then there is a ton of amazing things that were just presented. And I would like to try to attend a few of them. If just the link to the website where that information is to the counselors would be wonderful. Whatever is easiest would be great. And so to close us out with no further business, the Human Rights and Equity Commission, August 28th, 2024, hybrid meeting is adjourned at 6:32 p.m. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.